You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium from Hinckley Community Radio, a non-profit podcast radio station. Tonight's episode is about Alison Mack and the NXIVM, commonly known as NXIVM. So it's over to you, Mark.
Allison Christin Mack was an American actress who is probably most famous for her portrayal of the character named Chloe Sullivan in the superhero series Smallville from 2001 to 2011. NXIVM was a cult organisation that was led by convicted racketeer and sex offender Keith Raniere. NXIVM is also the name of a defunct corporation that Keith Raniere founded, which provided seminars in the field of human potential development and served as a front organisation for criminal activity by Keith Raniere and his close associates. Back in the beginning of 2006, Alison Mack became a member of NXIVM. Alison Mack then recruited other women to join under the guise of female empowerment. This then led to Alison Mack starving the other women until they fit sex offender Keith Raniere's sexual feminine ideal, leading her female recruits to engage in sexual activity with him. For doing this, Keith Raniere rewarded Alison Mack financially, along with many other benefits. And then on the 30th of April 2018, Alison Mack was arrested by the FBI in Brooklyn on charges of sex trafficking conspiracy and forced labour conspiracy. The federal indictment accused Alison Mack of, and I quote,
recruiting women to join what was purported to be female mentorship group that was in fact created and led by one Keith Raniere.
Greetings, Unexplainers, and thank you once again for tuning in to listen to this new mind-blowing episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a psychic medium, a Wicca, and a true crime buff. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the story surrounding Alison Mack and NXIVM. And this week's necessary disclaimer. This story is a tale that sadly involves details of sexual assault, cults, and minor references of self-harm, so may prove upsetting to some. And remember, not only do you listen to this at your own discretion, but all the opinions and comments are strictly my own. However, the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. What can I say, but when I swallowed a dictionary, I started at the back of the book. So, back we go to the story. Alison Mack was an American actress born on the 29th of July 1982. She was born in the city of Pretz in West Germany to American parents Jonathan Mack, who was an opera singer, and Mindy Mack, who was a school teacher and bookkeeper. The family lived in Germany for 2 years before eventually moving to the United States. Alison Mack's first modelling job on arriving in the US was for a series of print ads and commercials for a German chocolate company in the mid to late 1980s. She then went into modelling for a short time until, at the tender age of 7, she studied acting at the Young Actors Space in Los Angeles. Alison Mack finally got her big break with her first major television role in an episode of the Warner Bros. Series Seventh Heaven, in which she gained attention playing a teenager who committed self-harm by cutting herself. Her film credits include Police Academy 6, City Under Siege in 1989, Camp Nowhere in 1994, and the Disney film Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves in 1997. But Alison Mack's main claim to fame came in October 2001, when she began starring as one of Clark Kent's best friends, Chloe Sullivan, in the television series named Smallville. Alison Mack's portrayal of Chloe Sullivan earned her several awards and nominations, including being nominated for a Saturn Award as Best Supporting Actress in a Television Programme back in 2006 and 2007, which she did eventually win, and being nominated 7 consecutive times for the Teen Choice Awards Teen Choice Sidekick between 2002 and 2009. Alison Mack, who also appeared as a series regular for 9 out of the 11 seasons of Smallville, and also, so as to keep her fans happy, she appeared as an intermittent main cast member in the 10th and final season, including the 2-part series finale of Smallville. Her popularity did not just stop there, as from 2003 to 2006, Alison Mack's character of Chloe Sullivan appeared in her own mini-series spin-offs of Smallville called Smallville, Chloe Chronicles, and Smallville, Vengeance Chronicles. In her personal life, Alison Mack had a long-term relationship with the Canadian actor Chad Krawchuk during the noughties when she was residing in Vancouver, British Columbia, where Smallville was being produced. Just a little side note here, Chad Krawchuk is best known for films like Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice. So, let us have a look, or a closer look, at the company itself, spelt NXIVM and pronounced NXIVM. The first thing I looked for in my research was, what do the letters NXIVM actually stand for? And to be honest, I couldn't really find much. However, there do seem to be plenty of possible theories, with one theory suggesting that sex offender Keith Raniere must have stumbled upon something that sounds vaguely like a dandruff shampoo brand name, did a tricky all-caps type treatment, replacing the U and the V, and decided that the 5 letters, NXIVM, must stand for the scientific science of science. And according to the weekly online magazine, In Touch Weekly, they suggest, and I quote,
NXIVM has an astrological life path of 7, which is significant to the group.
The magazine also quotes that the website differentmeanings.com says, and I quote,
Number 7 resounds with the vibrations and energies of the aggregate consciousness, confidence and most profound sense of being, otherworldly arousing and mindfulness, profound illumination, otherworldly advancement, supernatural quality, instinct and inward knowing.
In one account, cited by a former NXIVM member called Sarah Edmondson, She stated that Keith Raniere chose the name based on the ancient Roman system of debt bondage known as NXIVM. On the 2002 registration with the United States Patent and Trademark Office for the NXIVM trademark, it states that, and I quote,
"The foreign wording in the mark translates into English as the next millennium."
The NXIVM Corporation was based in the New York Capital District and had centres throughout the United States, Canada and Mexico. The subsidiary companies of NXIVM recruited based on the multi-level marketing model and used curricula based on the intellectual property of Keith Raniere called Rational Inquiry. The courses that were offered at NXIVM attracted a variety of very notable students, including actors, as well as the children of the rich and powerful. At its height, the NXIVM brand had at least 700 active members. After this first short break, in part 2, we will look at more details of the NXIVM company, its founder member Keith Raniere, and how actress Alison Mack got involved.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
In 1998, Keith Raniere and Nancy Salzman founded NXIVM. On a quick interesting side note here, Nancy L. Salzman was a former nurse who had had experience with hypnosis. She is listed in the nurses database as having a nursing license in the state of New York from 1983 to its expiration in 2019. NXIVM, according to its founders, was a personal development company offering a wide range of executive success programs, or ESP for short. Its aim was to offer a wide selection of techniques for one's self-improvement. Keith Raniere himself has claimed that NXIVM's, and I quote, main emphasis is to have people experience more joy in their lives. During these NXIVM seminars, students will call Keith Raniere Vanguard and Nancy Salzman Prefect. The American digital and print magazine, The Hollywood Reporter, wrote that Keith Raniere adopted this title from the 1981 video game called You guessed it, Vanguard. The Hollywood Reporter also said, and I quote,
"In which the destruction of one's enemies increased one's own power."
However, within the organisation, the reason for these job titles was that Keith Raniere was the leader of a philosophical movement and Nancy Salzman was his first student. By 2003, nearly 5 years after its launch, 3,700 people had taken part in executive success programs, which included people like businesswoman Sheila Johnson, former Surgeon General Antonio Novello, Enron executive Stephen Cooper, Anna Christine Fox, who is the daughter of a former Mexican President Vincent Fox, businessman Edgar Bronfman Sr., along with actresses like Linda Evans, Grace Park and Nikki Klein. It was also rumoured that the entrepreneur Richard Branson had also attended these ESP courses, but in a later interview he did actually deny taking any of NXIVM's classes. After the actress Christine Mack, who was also in the Smallville TV series as Lana Lang, became involved with NXIVM in 2006, Nancy Salzman, who along with her daughter Lauren, at the time a junior NXIVM leader herself, went to Vancouver to recruit the Smallville star Alison Mack. Lauren Salzman and Alison Mack became remarkably close friends, so much so that they both eventually became Keith Raniere's inner circle and his sexual partners. In 2013, Alison Mack's Smallville co-star and recruiter Christin Mack left NXIVM. Alison Mack then became an enthusiastic proselytizer, thank you, Linda, or recruiter. I don't know, just put that, I don't know, for NXIVM, and even persuaded her parents to take courses. A quick interesting side note here, a proselytizer, yes, is someone who tries to convert or attempt to convert someone from one religion, belief or opinion to another. So, after Alison Mack had finished wrapping up production of Smallville in 2011, she moved to Clifton Park, New York, to be nearer to NXIVM's home base in Albany. Alison Mack joined NXIVM after attending a 2-day introduction to Janess, which was a women's group within the NXIVM congregation, eventually becoming a high-ranking member of the organisation. On her journey up the corporate ladder, Alison Mack made full use of the facilities at hand by becoming a member of Simply Human, which was an a cappella NXIVM singing group. She also became the MC, or Master of Ceremonies, of a multi-day festival called A Cappella Innovations. These multi-day festivals were hosted by NXIVM in 2007 and 2008. The events were originally billed as university singing showcases, but were alleged to be fronts to draw in impressionable undergrads for NXIVM. And sometime after being within the group, Alison Mack co-created what was to become a NXIVM program known as The Source. This Source was created for the sole purpose of recruiting actors into the company. In 2015, Keith Raniere created a secret subgroup within the NXIVM company called Dominus Obsequious Sororium, or DOS for short. On an interesting side note, the acronym Dominus Obsequious Sororium is meant to be a Latin phrase that the New York Times says translates to Lord over the obedient female companions. But there are of course other translations being battered around the internet as to what else Dominus Obsequious Sororium might actually stand for. For example, according to the Frank Report website, Dominus Obsequious Sororium actually translates to dominant over submissive, although the actual Latin has a more gender-specific meaning, which translates to a man is dominant, the women are submissive. This, of course, changes it slightly to the more Keith Raniere goal, but at the same time, it is not too much of a change to frighten off its potential new members. Dominus Obsequious Sororium, or again DOS for short, was an area of NXIVM which Alison Mack was allegedly second in command of. Dominus Obsequious Sororium was structured as a pyramid group with Keith Raniere at the top. With Keith Raniere at the top, and of course the only man, with subordinates including Alison Mack and other women as Keith Raniere's first-line DOS masters. DOS was ostensibly built up around female empowerment, but it mainly provided a means to traffic women for Keith Raniere's gratification. Alison Mack, along with other DOS members, recruited more women by telling them that they were joining a women's-only organisation that would empower them. However, the one thing that the new female recruits were not told is that Keith Raniere was going to be the leader of this women's-only organisation. I don't think I could have stressed the words women's-only enough there, do you?
Nope.
No. As a precondition for joining DOS, the female recruits were required to provide DOS with what they called collateral. This collateral would include things like nude photographs, damaging information about family and friends, and NXIVM's right to all their assets. The recruits were then told that this collateral would be released if they left DOS or informed anyone about the existence of DOS. These recruits were then controlled in ways which included the requirement to seek permission on absolutely everything they did. This also included asking permission to pee. Other controlling methods that the recruits had to endure was physical isolation, forced participation in readiness drills, sleep deprivation, extremely restricted diets, and being subjected to corporal punishment. Alison Mack reportedly recruited 4 women into DOS. These recruits included India Oxenberg, who was a cast member of the reality television series I Married a Princess, and was also the daughter of actress Catherine Oxenberg, who is probably best known for her role as Amanda Carrington in the 1980s primetime soap opera Dynasty. As directed by Keith Raniere, Alison Mack and others required their recruits to be branded with a symbol representing Keith Raniere's initials. I feel I should point out here that in a New York Times interview, Alison Mack claimed that the human branding was in fact her idea. This branding ritual would follow a script created by Keith Raniere. Alison Mack's recruits, at the time, were totally unaware that the branding symbol was Keith Raniere's initials, and were told by Alison Mack that the branding was a symbol of the elements: air, earth, fire and water. On a quick interesting side note here, the elements are earth, air, fire, water, and at a later date, ether. Ether is the material that fills the region of the universe beyond the terrestrial sphere. These classical elements were proposed to explain the nature and complexity of all matter in terms of a simpler substance. And on a thought of my own here, I've looked at pictures of this branding symbol, and yes, I can see Keith Raniere's initials quite clearly, but if you turn the pictures around just a little, I am sure you can see the letters AM as well, which of course would stand for Alison Mack. I don't know, but Google it and see what you think. A former NXIVM member, a Sarah Edmondson, stated in a 2017 New York Times expose and in a 2018 A&E special on cults that along with other details about DOS, she herself had been branded in an initiation ceremony at Alison Mack's own home. After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at a little history on Keith Raniere, NXIVM's collapse and Alison Mack's actual arrest and imprisonment.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
Keith Raniere was born on the 26th of August 1960 in Brooklyn, New York. He was the only child of an advertising executive, James Raniere, and ballroom dancing instructor, Vera Oshipko.
Sound like it.
When Keith Raniere was 5 years old, his family relocated upstate to Sullivan, New York, and his parents separated just 3 years later, when he was 8 years old. Keith Raniere attended Sullivan High School for 9th grade before transferring to Rockland County Day School, and then just 2 months prior to his 18th birthday in June 1978, he graduated. During an interview he took later on in his life, Keith Raniere claimed that at the age of 12, he read Isaac Asimov's mind control theme work, Second Foundation, and credited the novel for his inspiration with his work in NXIVM. In 1982, Keith Raniere graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. My apologies for all those people who go there. Barely passing with a 2.26 grade point average, or GPA, and failing many of his classes. And just to give you some sort of perspective with the grading, the average high school GPA in America today is 3.11. Throughout the 1980s, Keith Raniere was involved with the multi-level marketing company Amway. And in 1990, he founded a multi-level marketing company of his own called Consumer Byline Inc., or CBI, which was basically a buying club that offered discounts in exchange for recruitment. In 1993, CBI began to decline, and regulators in 27 states launched an investigation into the company. New York State filed a lawsuit alleging that CBI was nothing but a pyramid scheme. On an interesting side note here, a pyramid scheme is a business model which basically earns primarily by enrolling others into the scheme. However, rather than earning an income or providing returns on investments by sale of legitimate products to an end consumer, it mainly earns by recruiting new members with the promise of payments. As recruiting multiplies, the process quickly becomes increasingly difficult until it is impossible, so most members are unable to profit. Due to this pyramid scheme, pyramid schemes are very unsustainable and more often now illegal. In 1994, Keith Raniere created the National Health Network, a multi-level seller of vitamins. However, that business failed just 3 years later in 1997. In 1996, Keith Raniere signed a consent order with the New York State, resolving the case against the aforementioned CBI without admitting any wrongdoing and agreeing to pay a $40,000 fine. However, he ultimately only paid $9,000 to the New York State, claiming that he was unable to pay the remainder, although at the same time he claimed he had a multi-million-dollar net worth. Small print, eh? But overall, the consent order also permanently barred Keith Raniere from promoting, offering or granting participation in any chain distribution scheme. Public accusations of sexually predatory behaviour and inappropriate relationships with minors began trailing Keith Raniere in the early 2010s. Soon after his arrest in 2018, the prosecutors opposed bail, writing that Keith Raniere had, and I quote, "a decade-long history of abusing women and girls." At his trial, prosecutors introduced evidence that Keith Raniere held views approving sexual assault, child sexual abuse and incest. On the 20th of April 2018, Alison Mack was arrested by the FBI in Brooklyn on 3 charges, which included sex trafficking conspiracy and forced labour conspiracy. The federal indictment accused Alison Mack of, and I quote,
recruiting women to join what was purported to be a female mentorship group that was, in fact, created and led by Keith Raniere.
The federal indictment continued, and I quote,
Mack was one of the top members of a highly organised scheme which was designed to provide sex to Raniere.
Prosecutors also accused Alison Mack of concealing Keith Raniere's status as the leader of DOS and accused her of coaxing recruits to provide highly damaging personal information, meaning the aforementioned collateral, which included nude photos and the rights to the recruits' personal assets. After Alison Mack recruited women to join DOS, the federal indictment continued, and I quote,
Under the guise of this female empowerment, she starved women until they fit Keith Raniere's sexual feminine ideal.
Alison Mack directly or implicitly required her recruits to engage in sexual activity with Keith Raniere, and for this Alison Mack received from her boss a financial reward along with other benefits. On the 24th of April 2018, Alison Mack was released from the Metropolitan Detention Centre in Brooklyn on a $5 million bond, and she was held under house arrest under the custody of her parents, Jonathan and Mindy Mack, in California. But things did not just stop there, because during Alison Mack's arraignment proceedings, prosecutors also accused her of entering a sham marriage with the Canadian actress Nikki Klein, claiming that this marriage was put together to help her circumvent the US migration laws. This marriage was then confirmed as fake by the witness India Oxenberg, and that it was orchestrated by Keith Raniere in order to keep Nikki Klein in the United States. Just a bit of trivia here. Nikki Klein is a Canadian actress best known for her role as Callie Henderson on the sci-fi television series remake of Battlestar Galactica. Under the original indictment, Alison Mack faced a minimum prison term of 15 years to life if found guilty. And in March 2019, it was revealed to the court that Alison Mack and the other defendants in the case were in an active plea negotiation, as Keith Raniere appeared in court to plead not guilty to additional child pornography charges that were also related to the case. According to a filing by the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, starting in April 2019, Alison Mack sat down for a proffer session to assist the government in the prosecution of Keith Raniere. On an interesting side note, in US criminal law, a proffer agreement, proffer letter, proffer or Queen for the Day letter, is a written agreement between a prosecutor and a defendant or prosecutive witness that allows the defendant or witness to give the prosecutor information about an alleged crime while limiting the prosecutor's ability to use that information against them. As part of the proffer agreement, the subject may agree to create a statement known as a proffer statement, setting out their testimony. A meeting in which proffer agreements and statements are negotiated or set out is called a proffer session. The proffer testimony may also be recorded as video evidence, in which case it is known as a proffer video. During these proffer sessions, Alison Mack detailed the inner workings of DOS and also provided details regarding crimes committed by other first-line DOS masters, which included assignments to seduce Keith Raniere and efforts to find him a virgin successor. Alison Mack detailed Keith Raniere's role in devising assignments for her slaves. These roles included, among other things, Keith Raniere's repeated requests for nude photographs of her recruits, his instructions regarding the seduction assignment, and his encouragement to use demeaning and derogatory language, which included racial slurs to humiliate and belittle the DOS slaves. Alison Mack was also able to provide a recording in which Keith Raniere gives details on how he wanted the branding ceremony conducted. Alison Mack provided information as well to the government about how the American heiress, convicted felon and former leader of NXIVM, Claire Bronfman, carried out her attempts to harass and threaten DOS victims. On the 8th of April 2019, Alison Mack pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy, and admitted to state law extortion and forced labour. And in the June of 2019, Keith Raniere was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced in October 2020 to 120 years behind bars. Under advisory sentencing guidelines, Alison Mack was actually facing 14 to 17 and a half years in prison. The US attorney credited Mack with providing details and highly corroborative information, and so advocated Alison Mack for a favourable sentencing. Just days before the sentencing, Alison Mack released a statement in which she repudiated Keith Raniere, saying, and I quote,
"I'm sorry to those of you that I brought into NXIVM. I'm sorry I ever exposed you to the nefarious and emotionally abusive schemes of a twisted man. I am sorry that I encouraged you to use your resources to participate in something that was ultimately so ugly. I do not take lightly the responsibility I have in the lives of those I love, and I feel a heavy weight of guilt for having misused your trust, leading you down a negative path."
Mack continues,
"I threw myself into the teachings of Keith Raniere with everything I had. I believed wholeheartedly that his mentorship was leading me to a better, more enlightened version of myself. I devoted my loyalty, my resources, and ultimately my life to him. This was the biggest mistake and regret of my life."
In addition to the letter, Alison Mack's attorney asked the court for no jail time in consideration for not only her remorse, but her cooperation with Keith Raniere's prosecution. On the 30th of June 2021, Alison Mack was sentenced to 3 years behind bars, 3 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and a fine of $20,000. So, in the September of 2021, Alison Mack reported to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. She was eventually released early after serving 21 months of her 3-year sentence on the 3rd of July 2023. This girl had the world at her feet. She was young, attractive, with an amazing career in front of her. And according to Google, she earns an estimated $7 million from Smallville alone. But remember, this sum of $7 million is only an approximate figure, and it is highly likely she earned quite a lot more. I think in all likelihood, and this is just my opinion of course, that at the time when Keith Raniere got his claws into Alison Mack, she was probably fighting her own demons. And like any narcissist who preys on women, I think he looked at her and saw a wallflower. But not just any old wallflower, of course, but a very rich wallflower. By my own admission, I have never seen a single episode of Smallville. I'm afraid that at the time, the idea of watching Superman, aka Clark Kent, going through puberty just never really appealed to me. I have watched various interviews with Alison Mack trying to promote NXIVM, but there was one interview I saw on YouTube which I found both interesting and disturbing. In this particular interview, her and Keith Raniere appear to be in some sort of small room which looks to me like a changing room at a gym, and while she is being interviewed by Keith Raniere, her eyes start to well up, and as the narcissist sees this from her, he pushes her with more personal questions, which eventually leads her into a flood of tears. And then, like any narcissist who is trying to love bomb somebody, he takes full advantage of her vulnerability. I believe this was an early start to her poor decision-making skills, which eventually led to her downfall. Now, of course, I'm not condoning her behaviour in any way, and I think what she did was incomprehensible, and abuse of any kind is never justified. So, if you ever feel you are about to go off the beaten track, remember this about Alison Mack. She went from a Hollywood starlet to inmate number N090838-053.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 89, we are going to be looking at Daniel J. LaPlante, the murderer in the walls. Daniel J. LaPlante was an American convicted murderer serving multiple life sentences for the 1987 murders of Priscilla Gustafson and her 2 children in Tucson, Massachusetts. He lived with his mother and stepfather, and whilst growing up, he was sexually and psychologically abused by many adults in his life, including his father, stepfather, and psychiatrist. He was diagnosed with dyslexia at an early age, and some of his classmates described him as creepy and weird.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names and places was all mine. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by the basic copyright of Mark the Medium.